want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources. We can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening. The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources. We can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening. The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources. We can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening.
All right, good afternoon, folks. Keep watching. So we have like 5 more minutes to be on the show. So keep watching, and I will see you all at 5, let's say 1 p.m.
The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources. We can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening. The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources. We can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening. The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources, can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by all, by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening. The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources, can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by all, by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening. The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources, can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by all, by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening. The United States absolutely does not want these African countries, Ghana, Gabon, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, to turn into the next Norway because of their own oil-rich resources, can become one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries in the world with oil. That's exactly what happened in Norway in 1969 when they discovered oil. Went from being basically an irrelevant country, poor by all, by today's standards, becoming one of the wealthiest and most prosperous and highest life expectancy, free healthcare. People don't leave the country. They don't travel. They stay there after they graduate college in Oslo. It's like, imagine that happening to Africa. The United States absolutely cannot allow that to happen, cannot allow Africa to become prosperous. They'll do whatever they can to keep that from happening.
But everyone says it's losing it.
The Tampa market.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the horn of Africa.
But everyone has a different story to tell. Shell, which says it's losing it.
The Tampa market.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the horn of Africa.
Sorry, I was muted. All right, good afternoon, folks. Once again, welcome back. This is Frank. I am your host. This is the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series. I want to apologize. Last week, we missed the show because I wasn't here. I had traveled to New Jersey and I thought I was coming back, but again, things happen. I did not come back. However, I'm glad that we are back this afternoon. All right, so yeah, no crewman, welcome. Good afternoon and good afternoon to you all. Um, so today's topic it says, I know this is something that most of you have already seen, right? And you have your own knowledge about it as well. Again, WCC, we always have different perspectives somehow, in some other way. All right, and sometimes we also have different approach and different meaning or different flavor all into the movement we see going on, right? All right, so the topic for today says, I Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso wrong for leaving the neocolonial ECOWAS. Is it wrong for them to leave ECOWAS? Is it wrong for Mali to leave the ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States that need to protect Mali, that need to protect Niger, that need to protect Burkina Faso? Are they wrong for leaving that entity? An entity that's supposed to protect Mali. Why is Mali leaving ECOWAS when ECOWAS was funded to protect Mali? Right? Why is Niger leaving ECOWAS when ECOWAS was funded to protect Mali against the United States, against or England, against Germany, against France? Why would Niger want to leave ECOWAS when ECOWAS was funded? Folks, the reason why ECOWAS was funded, okay, as we might look at it, all right, to have a force, a regional force. But again, ask yourself, is ECOWAS a regional force in West Africa? ECOWAS was funded as a regional force in Africa, not against African, but against America, against England, against France, against Germany, against the enemies, against the oppressor, against the colonialists, against the enslaver, against these people. So if ECOWAS was funded as a regional force against these people, why would Niger want to leave ECOWAS? Why would Niger, why would Burkina Faso, why would Mali want to leave ECOWAS? This is WCC. We have different approach and looking at it differently based on the foundation, based on the formation of ECOWAS. If anybody here is angry of Mali leaving ECOWAS, then we ask you a question. If anybody here that is angry that Niger left ECOWAS, Burkina Faso left ECOWAS, then the question to you is, what is the purpose of ECOWAS? That's the first question we gave you. If you are angry that Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, they have decided to leave this noble organization in court, noble organization, in court, this regional organization, right? This regional body, all right, that was funded purposely against the colonialists, the enemies, the oppressor. That's what ECOWAS was funded for. ECOWAS was never funded to go against another African nation. ECOWAS was funded to work together as unity for the sole purpose of Africa and African period. Now, if you are angry that these nations are leaving ECOWAS, we ask you a question. What is the purpose of ECOWAS? Simple. And that's the question Burkina Faso is asking. What is the purpose of ECOWAS? That's the question Mali is asking. What is the purpose of ECOWAS? That is the question Niger is asking. What is the purpose of ECOWAS? Simple question. Welcome, folks. This is WCC. This is the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series aspect of WCC. Every Sunday at 1 p.m. One of the best platforms in the world. Even greater than BBC. Greater than CNN. Greater than NBC. Greater than most of these Western media. The only area, one of the most platform that you can come and hear something on Sunday, the gospel to be preached. Welcome. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing we're going to look at here, we're going to come back to the Niger, the Mali, the Burkina Faso situation with ECOWAS. I, for once, I have no regard for ECOWAS. I, for once, I have no regard for AU. As a matter of fact, AU is scrambling as well, though, because South Africa is planning to leave the AU, that useless organization. Now, let us look at recent incident that just happened in Italy. We're going to come back to Niger. That's going to be the icing on the cake. All right. Let us look at the recent incident of African leaders that was once again summoned by this little tiny nation called Italy. By this lady in Italy, the Italian Prime Minister. The continent of Africa was once again summoned by this tiny nation called Italy, the continent, a whole continent. The issue here is Africa as a continent can never summon any European nation. Africa as a continent can never summon any European nation. Even the least European nation can now be summoned by Africa. The least, the suffering, the poor European nation, the poorest, can never, ever be summoned by African nation. All right, let me make it clear for you. The poorest nation in Europe, the entire African continent, can never summon that poorest nation in Europe to go to Africa. The poorest nation in North America can never, will never agree to be summoned by the entire African continent. Joe Biden will never, ever agree for Africa to summon the United Nations. That word summon is an insult based on the level at this time. The word summon in this forum and that category, at the level of that understanding, the word summon is an insult. And that is why these European nations always say Africa is a shithole nation, shithole continent, shithole people. Sorry, folks, that's their worries. We got to speak it. Because of the attitude of African leaders. That's why the West always looked down on Africa. That's why they say Africans leader don't know how to govern. That's why they say African leader know shit. They know nothing. That's why they have no regard, because according to history and current event that are still going on, had it been it was Africa the other way around that did what America, what Europe have done to Africa, had it been the other way around, that Africans were the one doing it to Europe and to America, I mean North America, the entire North America, and in entire Europe, I mean those continents. Had it been the other way around, that it was the African continent that did it to them, there was never ever going to be dialogue with the African continent, and that is that of North America and Europe, or even Australia. Let me make it clear for you. Africans was never going to be in any dialogue with any white nations in the world. It was going to be the end. Africans, the African continent was never going to ever summon North America, Europe, Australia, Japan. No way it was going to happen. But look here. Some of these so-called African leaders who know how to speak, and by the way, we are getting tired with the white man language. We need our own languages in Africa to be effective now. Because the white man language, words are tiring in our ears. Because the more these African leaders come out with words of encouragement, those words of encouragement discourage us. Because we are tired hearing people like Nana Akufo-Addo, Warrior Ruto, and the rest with nice speeches. Let's get into it first. Let's read this article. Now, the first article here says Italian Prime Minister hosts summit of African leaders. Oh God. Italian Prime Minister. What bafflement about this article, about this summit, is that African leaders can never summon each other on the African continent to discuss African issues. African leaders can never come together. The only time African leaders come together is when foreign leaders summon them. That's the time you will see African leaders together. But you will never see African leaders summon each other on the African continent and take pictures and discuss African issues. But the only time you see African leaders meeting is when European, the colonizer, the enslaver, the devil just means one who devalue another human being is a devil. Devil means one who devalue another human being is a devil. And these people have devalued Africans. They are devil. When the devil call African leaders, when the enemies call African leaders, that's the time you see African leaders together in harmony, in peace, taking pictures. An Italian prime minister, someone call African leaders, call the slave. That's what someone means. Someone means calling the slave. You summon the slave to come on a plantation. You summon the slave to come on a plantation. and tell them what you want to be done as you get your products. They are just being so sophisticated in their approach of dealing with the modern slave, the modern day slavery. African leaders. That is why coup is the best thing that will ever and continue to happen on the African continent. We support coup if coup will be the only surviving method or moon to free Africa. If coup will be, I'm not saying coup perpetrated by America. I'm not saying coup perpetrated by Europe. I mean by Africans themselves. If that would be the only solution or method of approach, so be it. We support it. This is the lady that some African leaders to use so-called Negro, us Negro Africans. If only this prime minister had the resources Africa have, do you think there was ever going to have that with Africa? There was going to summon Africans? Never. They summon African because of the African resources. I thought it should be the other way around. Africans summoning these people. We that have the resources. But we have these dumb-headed leaders in offices, in government, calling themselves leader. When they are being led by the slave master, their slave master. Let's read some of the things she said here. But I don't blame these people though. Even though as we speak, I don't blame them. Because these people are doing what it takes for their survival. So as much as we come here to speak, it is the African leaders. Because we can talk from now to Judgment Day. These people will do what they need to do to survive. They are fighting for their survival. So we cannot blame them. We blame ourselves. We blame our African leaders who fail to hearken unto us when we speak, who fail to hearken onto platform like this. In fact, they see us as their enemies. So I don't blame America any approach America take, because America is fighting for her survival. I don't blame Europe, because Europe is fighting for her survival. Italy Prime Minister is holding a summit of African leaders Monday. In addition to 24 African leaders, European Union and United Nations, official and representative from international lending institutions are attending the summit. Now, look at this right here. International lending, L-E-N-D-I-N-G. Do you know what is in there? The international lending? The IMF is an international lending. The World Bank is an international lending. And other institutions that give money to these African leaders, they are lending. And other international lending. And some of those international lending are those entities who help, who sponsors some of those African leaders to become head of states. That's why you always see African leaders being summoned by these people and the goal. will make it clear. This is WCC. The objective is to present to African countries our vision of African. What an insult! What an insult! You see, our forefather told us, if we are not careful, we Africans, in gaining full control of our independent, whether economic, social, and the rest, the colonizer, the Europeans, Washington, D.C., they will come back as investors. The objective of Italy, the objective of Italy's calling the slave to come on a plantation was to develop Africa, or is to develop Africa. That's their vision. When in history have America have great vision for Africa? When in history have Europe have vision, great vision for Africa? When time in history, go back. These people have been on the African continent for centuries. What development have they done to the African continent for African people? The objective is to present to African countries our vision, their vision, Italy vision, European vision. So are they telling you African leaders, you don't have vision? Somebody have to create vision for you in the sky and tell you this is the vision we have. This is how Africa is supposed to be. This is how you African is supposed to be. This is where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be from here to here. Don't you have vision? You African leaders, don't you have visions? The colonizer have the vision for Africa. The same people are colonizing. The enslaver have vision for Africa. The same people are enslaving. What is going on here? So, Europe love Africa than Europe. So they really want to develop Africa. So the vision they have that you don't have, they want to give you their vision. After they have given you their democracy, and their democracy have never worked. After they have given you their God, and their God have never worked. They gave you their religion, and their religion have never transformed Africa. They gave you their democracy, their democracy have never transformed Africa. Every system they gave you, that system have never transformed Africa. Let me read. The objective is to present to African countries our vision, European vision for Africans' development. Prime Minister Meloni told Italian broadcaster Rai, this means a new, not paternalistic approach. So, folks, let's stick to this in the first place. So, this means if even they came out of these wars, this means that these people know in their head what they have been doing to Africans. Look, this is where sometimes when you read some of these things and you see those in authority still affiliating themselves with these people, that is so disheartening. For them to even come and say no paternalistic, no pediatric, all these things, that means they actually know what they are doing to Africa. That means they actually know what they have been doing to Africa is inhumane. That means they actually know that they've been exploiting you, they've been killing you, they've been dehumanizing you. And then they say a peer-to-peer approach to grow together. Oh, God. How can someone know that they've been raping you? They've been doing all kind of things against you. And they call you and you come. And then it says to you, listen, we call you because we've been raping you, we've been exploiting you, we've been lynching you, we've been dehumanizing you, we've been doing all kind of horrible things against you. But listen, this time around, you know, we notice that you are trying to become independent, you are trying to become powerful. And when you become powerful, that means we will become powerless. That means we will become terror. That means the position you're in, we will be. Our survival depends on you being poor. That is what they mean when they say these things. But listen, we don't want to be poor. But we are not apologizing for our mistake. But you know what? Just let it go. Let all come on the same plain equal ground. And then we work together for our survival and move on. That is what exactly these things means. And they put it into these Africans, into these slave faces. Let's continue here. But like I said, I don't blame America. I don't blame Europe. I don't blame them. This is what they are doing for their survival. That is the nature of mankind. What you can do to survive, do it. And if to them this is the best approach to demonize other people to survive, that's what they are doing. If we can get senses enough and do what we're supposed to do, these people will continue to do what they can do to survive. These are people that accept that killing and bumping and destruction is a means of surviving. You think they get time? Let's continue. The initiative is known as the METI Plan, named after Enrico METI, founder of state control oil and gas giant Eni. First of all, you see what they did here. Whenever they do these things, they come out with a logo, with names, with identity, that even years, decades to come, they will be on our face as the savior. Initial projects of the METI plant will include programs in education. Look, how long are we going to depend on these colonizers, on these enemies, on this devil, this demon for solution? When the solution is right within our hands. First of all, European education on the African continent is meaningless. American education form of educational system on the African continent is meaningless. That is why they never teach African about finances, about technology. All they teach is about the Bible. How many books from Genesis to Revelation? Who wrote the book? How many inspired men wrote the book? Those are the things they come and teach. But when you come to America, you go to Europe, they say no Bible should be in primary school or how they call it, high school, colleges. Don't teach it. Because you know what we do? It will subjugate your mind. Let's continue here. Initial project of the military plan will include program in education, healthcare, water, sanitation, agriculture, and infrastructure. Since, look, folks, all these, what have we not heard before from America, from Europe, in regards to uplifting Africa? What have we not heard before? Are these strengths? Are these new wars or old wars? Let's continue. French newspaper Le Monde report that Italy has collected just a little more than 3 million for the initiative. Another money that African people are going in for. They are not willing to work with Africa to uplift Africa. I mean the African puppets. Because this money, when they collect it, the Europeans, the colonizers know that Africa does not have a banking system. Africa does not have her own currency. So this money given to them will come back in America, in Europe. Because they have to bring this money back. It is not African currency, it is European currency. It is American currency. So they will bring it back and put it in the Bank of America or the Bank of the Swiss. And then this same money, they take it and give it back to them again as loan, their own money. The money the World Bank get to African nations are just African money. Because they gave you this money in bribe and corruption, and you take the same money and come and put it in their bank. And they take the same money and loan it out to you again. They recycle the same money back to you. Because you fail to have your own currency, you fail to have your own banking system as a continent. A whole continent cannot print her own money. We have to come to Europe. We have to go to Norway, smaller country than Norway, to print African money. But let's continue here. Italy is one the first places African migrants looking for better life often land in their trek across the Mediterranean Sea. What a shame. Why will Africans want to leave Africa to come overseas, to sacrifice their life over the sea, to go into another man's country for better life? Why? If African leaders were doing the right thing, if African youth were being employed, if resources on the African continent were being used for Africans, so all these African leaders who been making noise, they were all summoned by this lady to go to Italy. But guess what? There is something I'm going to touch on about William Ruto. You remember a time came when African leaders was going to Russia, right? When the Russians have their own Russian summit, right? And William Ruto came out and he said he was not going to that summit. It was a shame, as I'll paraphrase it, that African leaders have been summoned by Europe, by America, by Japan. Those are the things that he said, right? And he said we shouldn't do it. African leaders are supposed to be on the African continent to solve African problem, right? He was actually speaking for the colonizer. He was not speaking from the bottom of his heart. He was speaking because the colonizer, his master, his slave master, Britain, told him not to go. Because if he spoke against it then, why he went to Italy? Let's watch a video here. Our problem is not about America. Our problem here is not Europe. Our problem here are African leaders at this time. At this time, our problems are African leaders. Because the European will do what they need to do to survive. Washington, D.C. will do what she needs to do to keep her empire. We cannot blame them. We can't. What are we doing for our own survival? Especially based on history, especially what we have been through with America, what we have been through with Europe. What are we doing, African leaders? When I say what are we doing, I mean you people, because we are already doing what we need to do. But we're sitting here bringing out information and educating you people, because you people are in position of power. We expect you to do the right thing. What you need to do as Africans for us to survive, they are doing what they need to do. They are right. We don't blame. They are right. Every parasite have a way of feeding on another parasite. That's the fact. You cannot deny that. We are all parasites. But every parasite have a way of manipulating whatsoever it can do to survive. So if America as a parasite on Africa is doing what she needs to do, Europe as a parasite on Africans doing what she needs to do to survive, she will, and she will never draw back. They will never. So are we just going to be that meat where people will come and take advantage of us? But meanwhile, that meat that we own, we can't eat it. We are struggling when we have the meat. I don't blame them. They are doing what they need to do to survive. What are we doing, African leaders? Negro, horse Negro, slave.
Kenya's President William Ruto has offered a defense for his participation in the Italy-Africa summit this week. This move comes several months after he vocally criticized the practice of summoning African leaders to foreign capitals. Before we dive into our topic today, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channels and ringing the bell to be notified about all our exciting future videos. Following the Italy-Africa summit in Rome, the Kenyan leader issued a statement that marked a shift in his stance, expressing support for the pragmatic approach of selecting a group of leaders to represent the continent. I have previously noted that an invitation extended by one country to all 54 African nations did not necessarily serve Africa's best interests. He stated after the meeting in the Madama Palace in Rome. But those of us present at this conference, representing our colleagues, find it different and inspiring due to the pragmatic approach you have taken, Madam Prime Minister, Mr. Ruto conveyed. Ruto joined numerous other African leaders at Italy's Africa Summit, adding Rome to the list of capitals hosting such gatherings, alongside Beijing, London, Moscow, Brussels, New Delhi, Riyadh, and Washington. As early as April 2023, Ruto expressed his dislike for being gathered into halls or buses like school children. He emphasized his support for the idea of representation by the African Union. This sentiment was reiterated when he chose not to attend the Russia-Africa Summit in July 2023, reiterating the belief that African heads of state need not be individually summoned for summits when the African Union can effectively represent them collectively. It is not intelligent for 54 African presidents to go and sit before one president from another country for a summit. Sometimes we are mistreated. We are loaded onto buses like school kids. It is not right, he argued at the Mo Ibrahim Governance Weekend in Nairobi in April 2023. The decision we have made as African Union is that going forward, if there is going to be a discussion between Africa and any other country, we would send the chair and the bureau. That is the position I am taking as the president of Kenya. Ruto further mentioned that he held discussions with Kagame, concurring with that stance. He also engaged in a conversation with Prime Minister Abiy, and he too strongly supports the idea as the best position for the continent.
We have also decided that it will not going to be business as usual. We have these meetings, Africa, US meeting, Africa, Europe, Africa, Turkey, Africa,
India.
Now we are waiting for, there is another one, Africa, Russia.
And Africa, Japan.
And Africa, Japan. We have made the decision that it is not intelligent for 54 of us to go and sit before one gentleman from another place. And I mean, and sometimes we are mistreated.
Yeah.
You know, we are loaded into buses like school kids. You know, and it's not right.
Well, you are summoned. You know,
it's not right. So the decision that we have made as AU is that going forward, if there is going to be a discussion between Africa and any other country, we are going to be represented by the chair, the outgoing chair, the income, the bureau.
Chair of the commission or the chair
and the chair of the Rex, and we have 5 Rex. That should be sufficient.
Okay.
For, I mean, a meeting of maybe 6, 7. Yeah. That should be able to represent Africa. And that is the position I am taking as the president of Kenya. For any other meeting that we are going to have with all these requests that we have a meeting between Africa and one other country, we respect the sovereignty of others. I think to ask for reciprocation is not to ask for too much.
No.
And for us to agree that let us have this kind of setup. The only, because I had a conversation with President Kagame, and he actually led that particular position. I have had a conversation with Prime Minister Abiy. He believes very strongly that that should be the position of our continent.
However, in a turnaround less than a year after making these remarks, President Ruto of Kenya has attended the Italy-Africa Summit along with other heads of state. Notable leaders present at the summit include Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Comoros leader and African Union chairperson Azali Assoumani, Tunisia's Kais Saied, Senegal's Macky Sall, and Denis Sassou Nguesso of Congo-Brazzaville. In Rome, it is understood that Ruto traveled as the chairman of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change. In his statement, he defended Africa's right to extract fossil fuels, emphasizing that while no African country should be asked to halt the exploration of its natural resources, including fossil fuels, it does not make economic sense to build a dependency on them in local economies. Ruto highlighted the importance of true non-predatory cooperation to ensure that African countries are not left with stranded assets. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, aiming to alleviate the challenge posed by illegal immigration from Africa, mobilized leaders from the continent with an offer. She pledged an initial 5.5 billion euros, emphasizing a spirit of cooperation among equals. However, Italy stands out as the largest recipient of migrants from Africa, welcoming approximately 157,000 individuals last year, as reported by the European Commission. So what do you think of our video? What is your...
Now, that's the video right there, right? So we have seen William Ruto. So as we all know, England colonized Kenya. Kenya is a colony to England. Kenya is a slave nation to England, right? Now, for William Ruto to come out to say such thing, right? Now that we are coming to understand, he was doing it to convince all African leaders. Because as we know, Russia is not allied to England, it's not allied to America. So getting other African nations to go to Russia for summit, that is a big division. So he was discouraging other African leaders. Don't go to Russia. Rather, let's go to the slave master. Let's go to the colonial master. Let's go to America. Let's go to England. Let's go to Italy. Let's go to these people, not Russia, not a USSR. Because if he made that statement and then went for this meeting, that is what exactly he meant. And Melanie is saying she wants to alleviate poverty. How can someone alleviate poverty when poverty is the means of survival? Poverty in Africa is the means of survival to Europe and to America. So how will they come to alleviate poverty? War in Africa, proxy war in Africa is a means of survival to Europe and to America. Why would they want to come to stop war, to give peace? Other development in Africa is a means of survival to Europe and to America. Why would they want to come to develop you? Suffering in Africa, ignorant in Africa, is a means of survival to Europe and to America. Why would they want to come to let you out of ignorance? I remember, and I always gave this example, Frederick Douglass, when he was a little boy, when he was living with his slave master and his slave wife. I mean, the slave master wife, he was living with them. And the slave master had a son. The autobiography of Frederick Douglass, about 100 pages. And in our book, according to Frederick Douglass himself, because he wrote it by himself, he was a kid. And the slave master had a son. And the slave master son always went to school. And the slave master always went to work. And the slave master wife always left home as a stay-at-home mother. Now, being a mother, even though she was a white lady, but she still had some compassion somewhere in there as a mother and looking at a little child and seeing her child going to school. Even though Frederick Douglass was a black boy, but she still had a compassion for Frederick Douglass. So what she did then was, she always taught Frederick Douglass, her son, lesson, the slave master's son. Lesson to Frederick Douglass. Once upon a time, this day came, the slave master came and saw Frederick Douglass and the slave master wife. While the slave master wife was teaching Frederick Douglass the son's lesson. And the slave master told the wife, do not educate the slave. Do not educate the Negro boy. That's how it is written in the book, the Negro boy. Do not educate the Negro boy. If you educate him, he will become smart. Then he will know what we are doing to him is against humanity. So right there, they knew what they were doing was wrong. What they were doing was wrong, but they have to do it for their survival. Can't you understand? As long it is a means for them to survive, they don't care what happened to Africa, what they do to Africa. They don't care. They don't care what is going on in Palestine. They don't care what is going on in Gaza. They don't care because it is their survival. If we educate the Negro boy, he will know what we are doing to him is against humanity, and he will come against us. He will rise. So don't educate the Negro boy. So how can Melanie come and tell us, tell African leader she's going to uplift Africa from poverty? When poverty in Africa is a business for their survival. How can they come and tell you they are going to fight insurgency? They are going to fight terrorism when terrorism in Africa is being supported by them and financed by them. And they know if there's no terrorist activity and there is peace, that means progress have to go on in Africa. That means African youth will start thinking there's no more war. No, what they will be thinking is about the future. They will start thinking about different things. But if there's a war, you will not think about moving. All you think about is their survival. You are not thinking about resources. You are not thinking about education because it will be meaningless to you. First of all, there's war. What are you going to school for? After graduation, what are you going to do? In fact, you cannot even graduate. You will not even sit in classroom for 1 or 2 weeks, and you will hear gun sound. You will see people coming into your building, kidnapping people. So it's a business. Why would these people want to come and fight terrorists? And they will sit and then tell African leader we want to come and partnership with these people to fight terrorists. Why only in area where there are resources you will find terrorists? Let us sink in. Nobody can alleviate poverty in Africa, only Africans and African leaders. By you doing the right thing, it will alleviate poverty. By you stopping bribe, stop taking bribe from Europe and America, stop taking bribe from the World Bank because it subjugates you. Stop taking bribe for IMF. It subjugates you because you will not pay. You can't take loan and you don't have the economy to trade that loan around and be able to pay it back. You take loan to make business. You have no business idea. What's going to happen? That's how African leaders are going, pretending that they are leading. And then at the end of the day, they take the loan to make business because they have no business idea. They take that same loan and come and put it back in the bank. And then Europe and America take that same money and then loan it to another African leader because they know you will not come back for it to make business. You have no business idea. You are not a leader to lead your country, to lead your people. And they will take that same money, give it back. So the same money the Italian prime minister are going to give to these so-called knucklehead African leaders, they will take it back and come and put it back in the Italian bank because it is an Italian money. And then the Italian will take it and give it to another African leader. The same money has been circulated. They can never alleviate poverty. Poverty is caused by them, for a cause of survival for them. Set on the African continent as African leaders and solve African problems. Collaborate and solve African problem. African problem will only be solved by having one African currency. We have said this thing over and over. You need to have a currency that will be powerful to compete with the American dollar, the European dollar. Why do you think America is fighting so hard to break down the BRICS nation? Because with the formation of that BRICS nation, and the BRICS nation have her own currency, the dollar is gone. The pound is gone. Why do you think when Africa came out to establish Africa's own currency, the ECO, France and the United States and Great Britain, I mean, England, I'm not going to call it Great Britain, they make sure the ECO did not succeed. And African leaders still sit down there and can't think. Because they know your resources are being purchased by their dollar. Their dollar determines the value of your resources. Even though they don't even buy our resources, they come and exploit it from us, but their dollar determines the value of our resources. If we have our own currency to back up our resources will be valued according to our dollar. You know what kind of powerful Africa will become? Because our currency will become the number one. And at the same time, they want our resources, they don't have it. So there will be two things, will be fighting for our currency and our resources. You have the solution in your hand, and you allow Italian Prime Minister to come and tell you they are coming to alleviate poverty. When you can alleviate poverty in Africa in a second, if you want to. But you are still slave. Joe Biden will soon summon you before the 2024 end. Joe Biden is going to do another summon. They're going to call you the slave again to come to the slave plantation. And then after that, another, maybe Australia, I don't know if Australia have done her, but Australia might be calling you again to the slave plantation again. They will be calling the slave. Only African head of state can be summoned. But we have never heard that the whole European nations, they were summoned. We have never heard that the entire North America head of state were summoned. All the 7 continents, we have never heard their head of state was summoned. Only African leader can be summoned. Only African leader can be called like chicken, like cow, like goat. There's a reason they always summon them. And our reason, let's get to Mali. There's a reason they always summon African head of state. Now, what is that reason? Let's get to the east citizen of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger leaving ECOWAS. Now, it says Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger quit regional bloc. Now, I asked a question at the beginning of this discussion. I said, if ECOWAS was formed as a regional force, and the reason why ECOWAS was formed as a regional force was to work together in one unit against Europe and America, period. It was not to work together to go against South Africa, okay, to go against the southern part of Africa. It was not to work together as the Western nation to go against the northern part of Africa. It was never funded to go against the eastern part of Africa. It was never funded for that. It was funded as a unit, as a bloc to go against Europe and America. Now, if it was funded as a bloc, as a unit, as a force, to go against Europe and America, why were Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger quit? If ECOWAS was funded as an entity for freedom, Why were Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso quit? If they were formed as an entity for liberation, why were they quit? That's the question. And the question here is, if they quit, then why did they quit? What is the function of the regional bloc? Let's read something here. On January 28th, the three military, and I'm not going to call them military junta, I'm going to call them the official government. They are not military junta. In the eyes of Washington, D.C., they are junta. In the eyes of Europe, they are junta. France, that's a business. But they are a government by the people, for the people, of the people, and interest of the people. So let's continue. We'll paraphrase that. They wrote this. Now, on January 28th, the three heads of state, Europe and America, must respect African decisions. They must respect African decisions. Those people are no longer junta. They was never junta. They were fighting for freedom. They are not coup leader. On January 28th, the three heads of state, they are honorable. The honorable three heads of state of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced they would leave the colonial economic community of West African states, ECOWAS. A move that will limit opportunity for their citizens to seek justice for human rights violation. By the way, the reason why I took this article, it was not written by Africans. It was written by them. And when I say by them, you know what I mean. And I took this to challenge them in their writing. Now, this is one challenge I'm going to give to them. According to them, a move that will limit. So, according to them, if ECOWAS, now that ECOWAS, Mali, and Burkina Faso have left, the so-called ECOWAS is going to limit them from opportunity of their citizens to seek justice for human rights violation. That's what they said. The question here is, where were they when America violated Niger and Burkina Faso and Mali? Where were they when Europe violated Niger and Mali human rights? Where were they when ECOWAS, the colonial entity, violated the human rights of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso? Because the last time we checked, the entire Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the citizens that which they spoke about here were not found justice in a human right. These same citizens were on the street, were on stadium, supporting their government actions and telling human rights to tell America to back off, telling human rights to tell ECOWAS to back off. Where were the so-called human rights when America told ECOWAS to go and bomb Niger, to go and kill Nigerians, to go and wage war on Niger, that they were sponsor ECOWAS? Where were they when AU told them they will sponsor ECOWAS to go kill Nigerians, to go kill Burkinabes, to go kill Africans? Where were ECOWAS? Where were the human rights when ECOWAS violated those nations? Were sectional because of European interests, because of American interests? Where were the human rights? Oh, that time African had no right. Burkina Faso had no right. But America have right over Burkina Faso. Europeans have right over Burkina Faso in Burkina Faso. Americans have right over Nigeria in Niger. Where were the so-called human rights? Why didn't they tell ECOWAS that was not the right approach to wage war on Niger, to put sanctions on Niger? Where were they? ECOWAS is an enemy. ECOWAS is an enemy. It is a devil entity. So while we're mad at Burkina Faso and the rest leave ECOWAS and anybody complain, when ECOWAS subjugated, ECOWAS put Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso in captivity. No right of safe drinking water. What Nigeria did, Nigeria cut out their supply from electricity. ECOWAS. You put your people into captivity by the demand of America and Europe and France. Then what do you want to do? What do you want them to do? Then the best thing is to leave ECOWAS. Because ECOWAS is no longer a regional body, a regional force to fight against the colonizer. But rather, ECOWAS was funded to fight for America, to fight for Europe, to fight for France against another Africans. And we saw that clear. Let's continue here. So you human rights advocates, so-called, what was the right that you advocate for the Nigerian? Did you ask America? Did you ask Europe? Did you ask ECOWAS? Or you supported ECOWAS? And this is what we want to say. There is no human right in the world that will fight for Africans. If there is any, we ask you, have you brought America to justice for the crime committed against African people when it comes to slavery, colonization? Have you brought Europe to justice for the crime committed for devouring Africa, for enslaving Africans? Have you gone to Belgium and bring Belgium to the book for slaying African hands? Have you brought all these colonial organizations that are creating proxy war, and you know about it, in Africa to exploit African resources? What have you done? What did you do when Mali accused France of supporting Boko Haram, or insurgency or terrorists? In the airspace, but rather you accuse Burkina Faso, or let's say Mali, when they took France to the UN, rather the UN accused Mali. Human rights, where are you? We know that there is nobody in this world can fight for black people, only black people. There have never been a time in history anybody, any organization stood up for black people and gave justice and peace and freedom to black people. Where those perpetrators were held accountable. No nation in the world. Because by them, by definition, they are the cause. Let's continue here. In a joint statement, the three countries accused ECOWAS of becoming a threat to its members. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso accused ECOWAS, not the facts. That is why they left. The three countries accused ECOWAS of becoming a threat to its members, of being under the influence of foreign power. That's what made ECOWAS an enemy. And that is why they quit And that is why we support them quitting. And that is why we even expect more member nations to quit. Those nations that believe in African freedom should quit the ECOWAS. Because ECOWAS, it is now a colonial organization sponsored by US and Europe. Influence of foreign power and are betraying a funding principle. Yes, ECOWAS betray the funding principle of ECOWAS. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso have a point. They also accuse the regional bandits of failing to support their fight against terrorism and insecurity, while imposing illegal, illegitimate, inhumane, and irresponsible sanctions. Why should they stay in ECOWAS? The issue here is, let's be frank here. During slavery, Nana Akufo-Addo, in this time, as we compare, they were the people that sold other black people. They were the people that sold black people to the white. Tinubu, they were the people that sold black people to the white. Macky Sall, the president of Togo, Benin, they were the people that sold all black people to the white. And they are showing that today. On January 29, ECOWAS chair Niger expressed concern over the country's decision, saying that unelected leader engaged in a public posturing to deny their people the sovereign right to make first of all, I'm not even going to read it. This is a nonsense. What is our sovereign right? What is that sovereign right for the people to remain in captivity and be exploited by France, by Europe, by America? That is the sovereign right. For the people to have consistent votes or elections, and then you call that democracy, that is not democracy. Consistent election is not democracy. Consistent election is not peace. And what is peace about it? When they are being handpicked, when the election are being manipulated, those the people's favor cannot come into power. But those America and Europe favor, those are the people that come into power when the election have been manipulated. What is election in that? The people even support the coup than the so-called election. If coup is a means of freedom in Africa, we support it. Absolutely. We're unapologetic about that. So let's take this out. I'm not even going to read it. I can post the link. Because it's a complete nonsense what is said in there. It's a nonsense what is said in there. So I'm going to take it out. Now, we are going to tell them the reason why Burkina Faso married an ECOWAS. I mean, or Burkina Faso left ECOWAS. Now, why did they leave? They left because ECOWAS, as a neocolonial organization, worked for US and Europe, not in the interest of Africans. And if you are fighting for freedom, for liberation, you cannot be part of an entity that is fighting for the people you are fighting against. You know, the European, They have a way. Whenever they want to get at you, they use your own people to get at you. They use your own people to get at you. And that's what they've been doing. Now, let's see some of the reason why these people left. And let ECOWAS know it. And we don't care about ECOWAS, like we've been saying before. ECOWAS should go to hell. Now, they thought it was fun. ECOWAS thought it was fun. But look what is happening to them now. America or Europe cannot save them. Because this is what they wanted. They wanted division among African nations. And now they don't even know what to do.
ECOWAS begs for unity.
If we have been ever challenged, this is actually the time we have been most challenged. What those challenges require is nothing but the unity of ECOWAS and ECOWAS member states. There is no challenge before ECOWAS that cannot be addressed if we stay together, if we remain united.
You see the crap they are saying? How are you going to be together? How are you going to remain united? How are you going to solve the problem when you put in sanction on other nations? Not because it is the right decision, but because America told you to do it. Because Europe told you to do it. Because the enemies told you to do it. Now you see what's going on. And you say you have now been challenged. You saw it coming. You knew it was coming. That is why the European leader, they don't respect you people on the African continent. Because you continue to be mumu. You continue to be stupid. You continue to act like slave. And now when the reality hits you, and then you say, we have never done that. Oh, it is now that you know you are fighting for African unity. It is now that you know the formation or the underlying factors of ECOWAS. It is now that you know. When these member states are leaving, it is now that you know. You blunder, you mess up. Now come to your slave master and tell them, you mess up with us. Go to your slave master. Go to America. Go to Washington, D.C. and go to England. Go to France. Your slave master, you slave. Go to them and tell them, we mess up. This is how you got settled on the African continent and you allowed America to kill Gaddafi. How can you people always take over African leaders to America and Europe? But America and Europe, anything they do in Africa, they never turn out their leader to Africans. But you always said, and take African leader and turn it over to the white man. The African leader that is fighting for the freedom, that is fighting the enemies, you always take that leader and turn them over to the enemies. But you never see the enemies go against any of them and say, you know what, we're going to turn you over to the Africans. It's just starting. That's what happens when you continue to be slave.
As you are aware, we are continuously faced with terrorism, violent extremism, insurgencies, political disruptions, and governance deficit.
Again, it is not that you know that you face with terrorism. It is not that you know that you face with political deficit. When Burkina Faso told you, when Mali told you, when Niger told you, we are in a political deficit. And these deficits are being influenced by the West, by Europe, by America. And you pay ear nuts. And you said to them, we are fighting for our colonial master. You said to them as a slave, freedom does not define us. You said to Mali and Niger, Africa does not know freedom. Our freedom will come from Europe and America. What they say, that's what we go by. You said you are a slave. You don't need freedom. You want to be slave. You want to be on a plantation. You want for America and Europe to continue to exploit Africa. You say you are a slave. And by that, you say being a slave, you will put sanction on Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso. Being a slave. It is now that you know Africa has political deficit. It is now that you know Africa is suffering from terrorism. When Mali told you, when Mali told you, France was supporting terrorism on the African continent in Mali. When Mali told you, France was using the Malian airspace and supporting the terrorists. You never listened. Now that these nations are taking matter into their own hand, and they are succeeding in fighting terrorists, they are succeeding with the support they are getting from partners, from people who want to see them free. Because as a slave, like you will now be free. And that is why your slave master never do anything to liberate or to free you. Because they are the cause of you being slave. And you want to continue to be slave.
If these issues are not addressed promptly and holistically, we may underline and undermine our collective.
So now, it is now that you want to discuss this issue holistically. It is now that you want to discuss this issue by going beyond to look at the condition, the underlying factor. It is now that you want to understand what led to the coup. Oh, it is now that you want to understand. When George Weah told you the approach that you taking was not right, you listened to him not. When George Weah told you sanction on Niger was not the right approach, you listened to him not. When he told you ECOWAS, party carrying war, when he told you listening to America to put sanction on Niger was not the right thing, you listened to him not. That was one of the reasons why today they did not even like him as well. And I believe all of it contributed to the removal of President George Weah because he did not listen to you people in ECOWAS. It is now that you know. We need to understand, to look at it holistically. Why did he look at it holistically at the beginning? To understand what led to the coup. Why didn't you listen to the people that fell out the stadium? Why didn't you listen to them? It is now that today, it is now that you want to listen when they are leaving. Hallelujah. Today's Sunday is very great. Today's preaching, today's summer is great. Hallelujah. Miracle is taking place. And these are the kind of miracle we love.
Had won democratic gains.
Since its creation almost half a century ago, significant milestones have been achieved, particularly in facilitating the free movement of people, goods, and services across borders, as well as right of establishment for our citizens within the region. Millions of our people live and work in different member states.
So let's look at another reason why these nations let so good. We love it. And we expect more nations in Africa, in West Africa, who actually want to be liberated to leave ECOWAS. If you stay with ECOWAS, you are going nowhere. You'll be slave.
Well, everyone knows the results where after decades of independence, African countries are still grappling with poverty, food, energy, and healthcare crises. But Niger has made the world see what will happen if African countries distance themselves from the West. Shocking the entire world, especially the West, Niger has now become the fourth fastest growing economy in the world. It did this within just 3 months since the coup, leaving France totally shocked. Not only Niger, but Burkina Faso also joined the list of the fastest growing economies, ranking 9th in the world. But how did they do it? What unique did they do that allowed Niger and Burkina Faso to skyrocket their economies within just months, compared to decades before them? Let's know about that in this video. In 2023, Qatar became the fastest growing economy in the world due to its vast oil reserves, followed by Saudi Arabia due to the same reason. India was in 3rd position, followed by China in 4th, Thailand in 5th, and Japan in 6th position. But that's the economic growth for 2023. What about 2024, and what do IMF and other financial institutions say about that? Well, it's quite a big achievement that 2024 is the year for African economies. Since we have seen a wave of coups in Africa, they have started showing their positive results. According to the latest economic growth outlook, 7 African countries are among the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world. Yes, that's what African countries have achieved within just months. From number 4 to number 10, we see 7 African countries on the list, shocking the world. Niger is rich in precious natural resources, but until now, these resources were exploited only by France. By plundering these resources worth hundreds of billions of dollars, France would offer minimal amounts, enough to keep Niger running in the worst possible conditions. All the mining companies working in Niger were foreign, ensuring that only they and their home countries make a profit, offering pennies to Niger. You should know that Niger is a producer of diverse mineral commodities, such as cement, coal, gold, gypsum, limestone, salt, silver, tin, and uranium. In 2006, the country stood as the 4th largest global producer of uranium. The introduction of a new mining code in August 2006 led to the establishment of 2 entities, the Geological and Mining Research Center and the Mining Company of Niger. Since the adoption of the new mining code, the government has issued numerous permits for mineral exploration, which often go to foreign companies. Joining the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative in 2005, Niger formed a national consultative committee in late 2006 to improve transparency, including public representatives. The initial audit report reconciling revenue from mining companies with government receipts was slated for late 2007. Regarding the national economy, Niger's mineral sector contributes around 3% to the GDP and represents approximately 40% of the total exports. The International Monetary Fund notes that the growing interest in nuclear energy has boosted uranium demand. leading to investments in existing mines and increased exploration. But despite having uranium, the element that powers the future and is a major input of the Green Revolution, Niger is one of the poorest nations. Notably, the prominent French company Areva invested $1.4 billion in the sector from 2008 to 2012, aiming to double the country's uranium production capacity. But this doubling meant benefits for only France, keeping the situation in Niger the same. You should know that Niger plays a significant role in the global uranium market, contributing approximately 5% to the total uranium output and providing Africa with high-quality uranium ore. Since the 1950s, Niger has been recognized for its substantial uranium deposits located in the desert north of the Agadez region, approximately 1,000 kilometers northeast of Niamey. The initial mine opened in 1971 outside Arlit, operated by Somar, a national company jointly owned by Areva and the government of Niger. Areva holds a 63.4% stake, while the government of Niger owns 36.6%. But now, within 3 months of a coup and the expulsion of France, Niger is poised to be the fourth fastest growing economy globally by 2024, as per projections from the World Economic Outlook. Moreover, Niger is anticipated to be the fastest growing economy in Africa. This growth outlook is due to the radical changes being made in Niger. Until now, the government has been working to renegotiate the agreements with foreign companies and increase government stakes in mines. Nationalizing natural resources in Niger centers on the notion that by assuming control of these resources, the country can ensure that the benefits and profits arising from their exploitation directly contribute to the prosperity of Niger, rather than primarily enriching foreign companies. Nationalization aims to reduce dependence on foreign entities and establish economic independence. By controlling its natural resources, Niger can exert a more direct influence on the management, pricing, and distribution of these resources. In this way, wealth can be redistributed within the country. Instead of profits flowing primarily to foreign shareholders, nationalization allows the government to allocate revenue for public services, infrastructure development, education, healthcare, and poverty reduction. It will also ensure that a larger share of the revenue generated from the exploitation of natural resources stays within the country. This includes decisions about when and how resources should be extracted, processed, and sold on the global market. Turning our attention to Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso is forecasted to be the 9th fastest growing economy in the world by 2024 and the 6th fastest growing economy in Africa. While there are other African countries making strides, such as Libya, despite being in a state of war, we have to see Niger and Burkina Faso. It's because Libya was already included in the fastest growing economies list in 2023, so that's not extraordinary. However, both Niger and Burkina Faso were nowhere to be seen in the fastest growing economies list before. That means that the coups in these countries became the very reason for the spectacular economic outlook. When Niger increased the price of uranium from 0.80 euros per kilogram to $200 per kilogram immediately after expelling France, critics were skeptical. Now, the situation has reversed. French companies were selling Niger's uranium at 200 euros per kilogram and only giving 11 euros to Niger. Niger was accepting this because of the long-term agreements its former leaders did, caring about their personal interests. But now, Niger increased the price of uranium, making it equal to the international market price. If anyone wants to buy uranium, it has to pay 200 euros per kilogram as it pays to France. Niger became the first country to show how things should be done. By this, we can now understand why France and the West were so anxious about Niger. They tried everything they could to reverse the coup because they knew if the military junta became strong and made radical changes, it would mean an end to French exploitation. Now, that nightmare has become a reality. Even when African leaders engage in unpatriotic acts by stealing from Africa and investing in Europe, the continent is still ascending. It's both an indictment and affirmation of their incompetence and incapacity. Now, people are studying why such a radical change could not happen in Niger and any other African country before. Well, that's because Africans never felt united and stood against exploitation the way they did now. Despite being hit hard by sanctions, facing the worst food, energy, and healthcare crises, Niger's economic outlook is phenomenal. That's because from this moment on, all revenues are going to stay inside the country instead of being allowed to exit and get invested in foreign countries. Renegotiating agreements can give Niger's military immense power to decide the taxes on the foreign companies, besides buying a majority of shares back. Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré has already made such a strategy. He is establishing a grand state-owned company that will oversee all the mining operations in the country. This company will ensure that all resources, especially the gold, stay within the country instead of being exported. In other words, if French and Canadian companies mined gold and exported it, from now on, they would be directed to either buy at the international market prices or hand the gold over to Burkina Faso. All blatantly unfair agreements would be renegotiated to ensure that Burkina Faso pockets the majority of benefits in all mining operations. Due to the comprehensive plans that Niger and Burkina Faso have made, their economic outlook has been improved extraordinarily. However, imagine what will happen near 2024 when all these strategies will be in action and these countries will be attracting foreign investments. All this will ensure that whatever is mined stays in the country or is sold at fair prices. Do you think that Niger and Burkina Faso have shown African countries their real potential if they become truly independent? Isn't it true that this spectacular economic growth will encourage more coups in Africa and the West will lose all influence that it has left? Let us know your thoughts on the future.
So, that was another reason they left ECOWAS. Now, is there a bad reason for them to leave? Looking at these things, because these are reasons that we are giving, right? So it is good for them to leave, because when France was there, this country or these countries, they were never identified on the war stage as either of them being the fastest growing economy. And if it had not been the coup, there was never going to be part of the fastest growing nation in 2024 in terms of economic growth. Never. Because France was getting their uranium for $2 and then selling it on the world market for $200. Exploitation. And when they left, they threw France out, the colonialists. When they threw them out, all of a sudden they took matter into their own hands. Again, no one can alleviate poverty on the African continent unless African. No one can fight for war on the African continent unless African. By the way, if we are fighting war, it is because of the supply of these foreign organizations into those African nations. Ammunition. That's why Africa experiences war in other places in Africa, because these foreign organizations, these foreign nations, these foreigners are the ones supporting the proxy war in Africa. That's why they left Mali. That's why they left ECOWAS, because ECOWAS was being supported and spearheaded by Europe and America, not by Africans. Because ECOWAS failed its mission. ECOWAS failed its principle to protect Mali against Europe and America. But rather, ECOWAS protected Mali, Europe and America against those nations. And the fact that they were under this nation, they was not growing. And they left, and then they see improvement, they see growth. And the reason why they are growing is because they manage their own self. They manage their resources. They price their resources. They know their value. They know their worth. That's why they left. let's look at another reason. ECOWAS, you have no stand. You have no stand. And we want to see ECOWAS dissolve. Not because we want to dissolve because they are fighting for Africans and we hate ECOWAS. No. We hate ECOWAS because ECOWAS is fighting for the interests of America and Europe against Africans' freedom, against African liberation. And that's why we want to see ECOWAS dissolve. Even AU, we want to see AU dissolve. A coup on the African continent will be liberation, will be the peace, or will be the method of peace, of freedom in Africa, so be it. We already see it in Mali, we see it in Niger, we see it in Burkina Faso, so be it. I mean, coup led by Africans themselves. I'm not talking about coup being supported by Europe and America, no. If coup led by Africans will be the solution for independence, hallelujah, praise God to that. Praise the Most High to that. And we invoke the spirit of our ancestors into that. Let's see another reason why they left ECOWAS.
African leaders who finally seem ready to stand up to the West and defend Africa's interests. And more recently, it seems like prominent African leaders are even making statements about African unity. But wait, we shouldn't get too carried away. What leaders say and do can be two different things. As these next two examples will show you what I mean. First up, we have Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo. What? You may wonder how he's on my list if he says things like this.
It is time to acknowledge openly that much of Europe and the United States have been built from the vast wealth harvested from the sweat, tears, blood, and horrors of the transatlantic slave trade and the centuries of colonial exploitation.
Well, it turns out he says lots of things. Like, remember when he used to go on and on about Ghana beyond aid?
So well, that's all Ghana beyond aid is that we need to depend on ourselves. We need to find the policies and resources that will enable us to stand on our own feet.
Let's just say that promise didn't turn out so well. He also stabbed Burkina Faso and Mali in the back at the US-Africa Leaders Summit.
Today, Russian mercenaries are on our northern border. Burkina Faso has now entered into an arrangement to go along with Mali in employing the Wagner forces there. To what extent we can have you as a partner in confronting these threats?
Too bad Akufo-Addo doesn't have the same fear of the US military as he does for the Russians. Next on our list, we have the great William Ruto, President of Kenya. Remember this?
Why are we bringing dollars in the middle of our trade?
Ruto preaches de-dollarization and yet takes on more and more IMF US dollar debt. The lender's policies have increased the cost of living, led to economic hardships and mass protests. In response, police violence has become a major issue in Kenya. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project reported Kenyan police used excessive force between January and September 2023, during which the toll of fatalities was up to 175.
And this comes from the man who agreed to send Kenyan police to Haiti on behalf of the United States.
This mission is a fundamental intervention to provide the necessary conditions for Haiti to consolidate its development and governance.
Are you sure? Haitians and Kenyans would both beg to differ. Police violence doesn't seem like a necessary step towards development or unity. And last but certainly not least, we have neocolonialist-in-chief Paul Kagame, president of Rwanda. He is known for his excellent speeches, such as this one.
People have come to take it for granted that Africa is poor and therefore it must remain as such, which is not true because Africa is actually very rich both in terms of natural resources.
But what does Kagame mean when he says Africa is rich in natural resources? Maybe you've seen something online recently about the movement to #FreeCongo or about the genocide ongoing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Paul Kagame is accused by many of funding and fueling the M23 rebel group responsible for mass death and destruction in Congo. It's led to the smuggling of billions of dollars worth of Congolese resources across the Rwandan side of the border. And who is profiting from war in this part of Africa, known for being one of the most resource-rich regions of the globe? Apple is benefiting. Tesla is benefiting. Microsoft is benefiting. The ruling classes of the United States and Western Europe are benefiting. Is this what Kagame meant when he said that Africa is not poor? So in the end, things are not all what they seem. People say one thing, but their policies point to something else. But don't despair. All across this continent, I feel the African masses are waking up. People can tell what true leadership looks like. They are joining organizations and coming together to fight for an Africa that is unified and liberated from imperialism and capitalism. And you can be a part of it too.
All right. That's another reason. These people left ECOWAS. Why would they want to be on ECOWAS when Nana Akufo-Addo, the slave, sitting with his slave master, selling his African brothers and sisters to the slave master? In modern day time, Nana Akufo-Addo were the chief that sold their Africans, brothers and sisters, to the white men. In modern day time, whatever root to them were the chief that sold their brothers and sisters to the white men. Why would they want to be on ECOWAS when you are working with your enemies? The people they see as their enemies, the people Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad see as their enemy. Nana Akufo-Addo is working with those people. Nana Akufo-Addo is the, how they call it team, the spy. Nana Akufo-Addo is the spy. He's the CIA for America. He's the CIA or the FBI to infiltrate the African movement, the African freedom, the African liberation. Why would they want to stay? And Nana Akufo-Addo is a key voice on the ECOWAS. Why would these nations want to stay in ECOWAS? Nana Akufo-Addo saying that with his slave master. Tony Blinken is the slave master for Nana Akufo-Addo. Anthony Blinken is the slave master for the Ghanaian president. Anthony Blinken, Joe Biden, they are the slave master for ECOWAS. Then why will Niger stay on ECOWAS? Why will Mali, Burkina Faso stay on ECOWAS? No reason, right? There's a reason. Those are the reasons they will not stay. And those are the reasons they left. Because they do not want to be sold into captivity by their own brother. They do not want to be sold into captivity by their own brother. You the class, you be mumu. Because they saw Nana Akufo-Addo sitting with his slave master, with the slave master, selling Burkina Faso, selling Mali, selling Chad, selling Niger to Anthony Blinken, the slave master to Nana Akufo-Addo. So yes, Ghana, you have a slave who is your president. So yes, ECOWAS, we have slaves who serve on ECOWAS to sell their brothers and sisters to Europe and America, to sell the African nation to Europe and America. This time around, it was not Europe and America sitting in a conference in 2023 or in 2024 talking about dividing Africa, but rather it was the kings in our modern day time, Nana Akufo-Addo, the king in our modern day time, William Ruto, and the rest that was selling the African nations to Europe and America, that was selling their African brothers and sisters to Europe and America. That's why these people left. So now you see that coup is the only solution to African freedom. Because elections is a quasi. Elections in Africa is not the solution to peace and stability. It's not the solution to security in Africa. Frequent election in Africa is not democracy. Frequent election in Africa is not freedom. Frequent election in Africa does not define freedom. Does not define the people's voice. Because elections in Africa are being manipulated, are being rigged. That's why these people left. Let's look at another reason why they left. The last reason. There are so many reasons, but we got to go.
Last year was trying to backbite his fellow black brothers to gain favor from the white, which he made a complaint to the West that Burkina Faso had engaged Russian mercenaries, particularly the Wagner forces, and he suggested that Burkina Faso was compensating them with a mine. Most of you could remember how I reacted to the video, and I condemned him. Not only me, but most of my fellow fighters also, we condemn him on that particular statement. Now, this update just came in. It says Burkina Faso military leader Ibrahim Traoré has forcefully rejected the allegation made by Ghana's president Nana Akufo-Addo regarding Burkina Faso's involvement with Russian mercenaries, Wagner Group. In an interview with President Traoré, although he didn't mention any specific names, but he labeled the statement as false and emphasized that the accusation made last year are baseless. And you see, the only person captured on camera making those accusations is our president, the president of Ghana, Akufo-Addo. Quoting Ibrahim Traoré, this is what he said. Unfortunately, we have seen heads of state who fell into that lie and went to tell the lie that we supposedly give mines in our southern part to Russia. That is a lie. Why give? If the Russians want mine, we have our own mining code. They come, they integrate and acquire license, they pay their taxes and everything they have to do like everyone else. So there is nothing we give the Russians. He added that it is a fake news, and he clarified also that there are currently no Russians on the front line actively involved in combat in their fight against terrorists. You see, it was Akufo-Addo, the president of Ghana, who made these claims during the US-Africa Summit in Washington last year, that Burkina Faso had engaged Russian mercenaries, particularly the Wagner forces. And he made a claim that Burkina Faso was compensating them with a mine. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also in Burkina Faso expressed disapproval of this statement after a meeting with Ghana's ambassador, highlighting that Ghana could have sought accurate information through diplomatic channels. Now, the question, who at all is the advisor of our president, or who have been feeding him with false information that anytime he will go out there to disgrace the whole nation? In the video, you realize that Akufo-Addo was practically seeking favor by trying to sell his own black brothers to the white. Even the facial expression of the people around him, the people were surprised that he was doing that. You see, if you were to be living in the days of slavery, Akufo-Addo would have been one of the people selling his own black people in exchange for dollar. Today, he's one of the voices strongly calling for reparation fee from the slave masters. Let me say this again. Any African leader calling for reparation fee should stop it with immediate effect, because asking for reparation fee is like trying to feed on the carcass of our ancestors, because no amount of money can replace the dead, the rape, the abuse, the unpleasant things our forefathers have been through. No amount of money can repair that. Reparation fee will be of no benefit to any African nations. It will end in the pocket of these greedy politicians. What I thought did a black man do to a fellow black man, that anytime black man comes face to face with a white man, black man is ready to go against his fellow black man in favor of the white. It is high time this nonsense must stop. Guys, you all remember this video where Akufo-Addo...
Okay. That's the end of today's discussion. We have more to show, but because of time, we can't do everything. But these are the reasons. These are some of the reasons that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger left ECOWAS, and we have no regret of their decisions. In fact, their decisions have been one of the best decision made in 2024. One of the best decision made in 2024 when it comes to African liberation, African taking things into their own hands. The best. And but that, I speak on their behalf. They are unapologetic about the decision they made to leave ECOWAS. Because ECOWAS is an European entity. ECOWAS is an American entity sponsored by America, sponsored by Europe. ECOWAS get her vision for America and Europe. ECOWAS get her support from America and Europe. ECOWAS get her mandate for America and Europe. So they are right. We are right to leave. We are right when we say we want to see ECOWAS dissolve. Just how our aim is to destroy the capitalism. Just how our aim is to destroy neocolonialism. Any organization of Africans that stand to fight for this colonial policy and attitude that seeks to exist as a neo-colonialist, we have no regret. We want to see you dissolve and terminated. That is our stand. And we want to see more nations leaving ECOWAS. Even AU, they have come to that point. South Africa is planning to leave AU. It's in a meeting. It's in a discussion. It's in a loophole. It's around the edge. And we hope it starts with South Africa. That is not to say we have bad aim against these African organizations to fall. Somebody may say, you are an African. Why do you want to see ECOWAS fall? Why do you want to see AU fall? AU is not fighting for Africans people. AUs have been fighting. AU have fought tirelessly against Dr. Arakina. And if Arakina have been fighting for Africans, and AU is fighting against that lady, we are against AU. If Petro Lumumba tirelessly have been fighting for Africans, and AU is against Petro Lumumba, we are against AU. Therefore, we want to see them fall. We want to see them dismissed. Just how we want to see this colonial empire fall, that's how we want to see this neo-colonialist entity on the African continent fall. And that is our stand. We don't care whether you are an African. We don't care whether you are an African organization. That is why our fight is not just Europe and America. Our fight is not just the Western world. Our fight is against anybody that is against African freedom. Our fight even go to our brothers and sisters who think they can survive without Europe and America, but that definition by itself, they are slave. Our fight also go against them because they are the one infiltrating our system. They are the one the slave master use. First, this is today's presentation. This is what I have to give today. And we are so glad that Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso left ECOWAS. And we see more African nations to leave ECOWAS. And we see more African nations who believe in true freedom and liberation to leave AU. I will see you all Saturday and Sunday. Thank you. Peace. Huru.